So can I just slide my camera just to black? Like I can do that.
Or I can stop your camera.
Okay.
Here you go.
Okay, perfect. I don't need to be up there the whole time.
Okay, so hi everyone. Good morning. Thank you for tuning into today's webinar. The topic will be Welcome to Canada, Doing Real Estate Business in Canada, Commercial Side. Just some administrative items. This will be about an hour long. There will be a Q&A session at the end. I want to introduce Aziz, who will be presenting today. And anyone who's watching this webinar will be muted. But if you have a question, if you just put your cursor over the little screen, a little button like window will pop up, and you can ask a question. And so I will hand it over to Aziz.
Thank you, Annie. Good morning, and welcome to the seminar on a look at commercial real estate in Canada. As you see on your screen, my name is Azizali Kanjee, and I am President Broker of Record of International Property Brokers, brokerage based out of Mississauga, Ontario, Canada. And I've been in the business for over 43 years, involved mostly in commercial real estate in Ontario and Canada, and more recently in the past 10 or 12 years been doing a lot of work internationally as well, both inbound and outbound. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, and we'd like to talk today, we'll talk about some insights on Canada, some of the activity in the commercial real estate area outbound from Canada, how it's organized, how the real estate industry is organized here in Canada. We will talk a little bit about the residential market as well, because that is very important to the commercial real estate activity. We will talk about Realtor.ca, which is very similar to Realtor.com that you have in the USA. We'll then dive into the commercial activity and a high look at Toronto marketplace, and I'll tell you why a little later on why we talk of Toronto as a hub, and how CREA has an affiliate program. CREA is the Canadian Real Estate Association, our equivalent of your National Association of Realtors, and how we have an interesting program for international realtors working in Canada. Next, please. So I'll start off with an overview of Canada. We've got a lot of cities and towns in Canada, but we've got 13 of the largest ones showing here on the screen. Many of you, I'm sure, will have heard of Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, perhaps Saskatchewan and Winnipeg, Toronto, obviously. But there are a lot of other places which are smaller but very important in the commercial real estate business in Canada, such as London, Hamilton, Ottawa, Montreal, and even Halifax, and points east of here towards the east coast of Canada. Like the US, we go from Vancouver to the island on the east, so we're about 5,000 miles across the country, with a lot of diversity. Next, please. So this is a very interesting slide for you to know that we are the #1 country in the G7 for lowest effective taxes. We are the #1 country in the G7 for living conditions and quality of life. And we are the #1 most highly educated workforce in the OECD countries. These are very, very updated and very recent statistics, and we have held these positions for several years now. So Canada has certainly got a lot to offer to investors coming into Canada to invest and to live. Next, please. Canada's biggest industries would be mining, oil and gas, renewable energy, IT. IT plays a very major role in Canada today. We have some leading institutions in digital media, in communications, and research and development in those areas. Financial services, we are represented by some of the largest companies in the world in Canada, based out of predominantly the Toronto, Vancouver, Ottawa, and Montreal marketplaces. A large equipment and machinery and automotive industry situated sort of decentralized in many towns and cities across the country. A large farming component in Canada. The agri-food business is very large. We are large exporters of agri-food business. Medical devices, biopharma, and pharma itself is very highly represented in Canada. We have some of the largest pharmaceutical firms in Canada, as well as we have chemicals and plastics. The small to medium industry base is very large right across the country. Next, please. If we look at the Canadian investment in the US, we are one of your largest, perhaps the second largest residential investor in the US in the last couple of years. We were the number one, which I think we've been replaced by China in the last year or two. 39% of Canadian investment goes into Florida, 14% into Arizona, 9% into California. As far as Texas is concerned, we're at 3%. But more recently, we have seen some activity go into the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and that might be a trend that we're beginning to see. Canadians, as you know, love the sunshine. And if you notice, Florida, Arizona, and California being sunshine states, Texas is also one of them. And I think you have a great opportunity to bring in more Canadians into your state. Next, please. In terms of commercial activities, the USA is Canada's largest trading partner, where we have brought in approximately 47.8, almost $50 billion of investments into the commercial activity in the US. As a matter of fact, the largest landlord in New York, commercial landlord in New York, is a Canadian company. As you can see from this list, we are way ahead of every one of the other investors in the USA. Next slide, please. So the Canadian real estate industry works very similar to that of the United States. We have the National Association, which is the Canadian Real Estate Association, similar to the National Association of Realtors, followed by the provincial, which is very much like your state legislation, which are provincial associations. We have 10 provinces and 2 territories in Canada. The Canadian Real Estate Association deals with the federal issues, whereas the provincial associations, similar to your state associations, work in the provincial and territorial areas. And then we have local real estate boards and associations within each of the states. For example, we have 38 local real estate associations in the province of Ontario. The Ontario Real Estate Association represents the state or the province of Ontario and sits on the Canadian Real Estate Association board. So we are very organized. We have approximately 125,000 realtors across Canada. As you realize, our population of Canada is about 37 million, which is about the size of California. We are generally 1/10 of the United States in terms of all our activity. And so you will see that reflected in our activity, in our real estate brokerages, numbers of real estate salespeople, and our boards and associations. Of the 125,000, we have probably around 5,000 fully committed commercial real estate salespeople. We call them salespeople, whereas you would call them agents, but that's the same term as your agents. We have about 5,000 commercial agents that are purely commercial in Canada at this point in time. Next, please. In terms of our home sales, from statistics that we've received from the Canadian MLS system, our sales have risen by 3.6% month over month in April 2019 versus 2018. We did see a drop in February, which was the lowest since 2012. Having said this, we in Canada have seen a general upswing of real estate year over year over the past 18 years. There has generally been an upswing for the last 18 years. Traditionally, we saw a lot of 7-year cycles, but as I said, for the last 18 years, we haven't seen many of those cycles. It's generally been on an upswing for that period of time. The activity was slightly below reading in the tail end of 2018, but it has started to pick up again as we approach summer this year. If you look at the market balance in 2016, 2017, the inventory had become very, very low. Traditionally, we've seen fairly equitable inventory, but we're beginning to see a bit of a climb again, which is a good thing because our prices had been affected quite a bit, as you will see with the red line. You know, based on the inventory, the prices had started going up quite a bit. We do have some sort of seasonal adjustment in this picture, but overall, this is a very good replication of what our market is like in Canada in the residential marketplace today. Next, please. Our global clients, as you can see, United States was our largest investor for many years. But it seems to be replaced by China in the last couple of years again. China is in 36% of the investors. United States has been the 25%, which is still very, very significant. United Kingdom has got 10%. India is at 8% and Hong Kong at 8%. In this slide, you will see that China and Hong Kong has been split up because there is a substantial differential in the investors that come from both China and Hong Kong. They also seem to invest in different parts of Canada. What we're also finding is that the Hong Kong investor has got a substantial eye on the Toronto marketplace, whereas China itself has got the mainland Chinese population invests across the country as well, as do the Hong Kong people, but they're predominantly like the Toronto marketplace. Excuse me. Realtor.ca, this is our version of your Realtor.com. It is the largest viewed website for Canadian real estate. It is available on all forms of equipment, from the desktop to mobile, and of course on your smart watches as well now. It is a very, very good site for your first glance at Canadian real estate. Canadian real estate is very diverse. As I said to you, we have 10 provinces and 2 territories, and they are at various different levels of activity. If I can touch on this activity for you at this point in time, you will find that in central Canada, where if we talk about the Toronto marketplace or the Ontario province, so the province of Ontario marketplace, that perhaps seems to be the most active in terms of real estate in Canada. Vancouver is the next very active area, or British Columbia in general, Vancouver in specific, with a lot of Chinese investment in both the cities. It has taken on a very, very large growth in property prices. We have seen a tremendous amount of growth in the Montreal and Quebec area, predominantly started off with French investors, but it has become a very big hub for international investors. We're seeing a lot of US, Chinese, and Middle Eastern investment going into Quebec in the last recent while. Alberta and Saskatchewan are our prairie provinces, which seem to have slowed down in the last 2 or 3 years, which brings up a very large investment opportunity for foreign and local investors. The prices have dropped because of our oil markets about 3 or 4 years ago. But this opened up. That region is, of course, also very, very big for our agricultural markets. And the oil industry, when it started slowing down for a while, we saw a tremendous opportunity for investors to come in for typically the buy low situation. That poses a very, very good investment market today, although the residential market there is still quite strong in the lower price market. We are seeing a large number of commercial investors going into that area, buying up some type of commercial investment, some of it being converted into residential, and some of it being converted into smaller office use type of property. The retail real estate market still continues to be strong in those markets. Realtor.ca will give you a very good idea of the activity when you look into the statistics on that website as well. Next, please. As I said to you earlier on, in the first quarter of this year, we have seen that Realtor.ca has been searched quite extensively, and the top 10 cities searched from around the world have been Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, Ottawa, Montreal, London, Windsor, Victoria, Mississauga, and Oakville. The majority of these cities are in Ontario, that is Toronto, Ottawa, London, Windsor, Mississauga, and Oakville. You will find that a lot of foreign investors, as I said earlier, look at Ontario first as the hub, as the financial capital of Canada. And so that is why you will see a lot more activity in this area. Our large immigration in Canada is playing a major role in this as well. And the major cities looking in Canada into Realtor.ca are Australia, China, Mexico, Germany, Hong Kong, India, South Korea, United Arab Emirates, United Kingdom, and of course the United States. One of the things you'll notice that Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, and Montreal would probably be in most of the searches. These are the more prominent areas of interest in Canada right now, and happen to be the most popular cities for investment as well at this time. From the commercial aspect, if you go into Realtor.ca, the commercial real estate area is very well represented on Realtor.ca. We've seen over 325,000 searches from trusted realtors in Realtor.ca for commercial real estate realtors and properties. The commercial real estate area that people are looking into are business, retail, vacant land, multifamily, industrial, office, agriculture, other, hospitality, and institutional. Now, there might be a little bit of a mix here because hospitality also does fall under business. It also does fall under retail. So some of those numbers might not be showing well under hospitality, but might be under business and retail as well. One of the things that has created this activity in business and retail and vacant land has been immigration. A lot of our immigrants coming into Canada are buying businesses or opening businesses in retail locations. Many of them are also buying vacant land and going into the development business. The development business is very live and well in Canada. We have a tremendous amount of development going on right across the country. If I can give you an example, there are probably about 169 cranes in the downtown Toronto core right now. That's a large number of development going on in just the downtown Toronto marketplace. The multifamily marketplace is huge in Canada. The new condo development is taking a very large part of that development. And as you know, in Canada, perhaps very similar to what you have in certain states in the US, no development takes place until almost 70 to 80% of the development has been pre-sold. So the majority of this property being built right now is pre-sold to the point of 70 to 80%. We're still seeing a very strong marketplace in both residential and commercial real estate in Canada. In the major cities, obviously, we're seeing a lot of development. And we are also seeing pre-selling being the major way of selling this kind of real estate. When we talk of residential rental development, this has been very, very slow in the last 10 odd years, but it has started picking up activity. And we have also seen that some condominium developers have actually, in the Toronto marketplace, switched from developing a condo for sale to a rental marketplace. We have also seen a very strong sale of residential rental buildings. And I'll talk a little bit about that in one of the future slides in terms of pricing. Next, please. The commercial terms that people have looked at, again, on realtor.ca have been what you see here. Again, you are noticing predominantly a lot of retail businesses. Again, this is created by our large inflow of immigration. We have an immigration of at least 250,000 people a year and more. We have a very robust immigration policy, and we're seeing people come from many, many countries around the world. So this slide obviously shows the reason for small business is because of this immigration movement into Canada. Commercial overview, again, I've touched on it in a few slides as we went along, but the commercial marketplace is very much alive and well in Canada. Like the US, we have seen companies such as Amazon taking a large chunk of the retail business. This certainly has affected our retail sector, where many shopping centers in Canada are repositioning themselves for this change. However, this has not affected a very large number of shopping centers. The larger ones have actually been on a growing mode. The majority of the larger shopping centers in Canada have been growing, have been adding on leasable square footage and changing their mix of tenancies to accommodate these changes. Our larger department stores have actually consolidated. Some of the US-based chains are now very strong in Canada, either by acquisition or by a Canadian firm, or have come in and moved in to take advantage of the increasing Canadian population. Again, this is seen in the major cities across Canada. We are seeing cap rates across Canada of approximately 4.5% to 5.5% in the retail sector in Canada. We're also seeing smaller shopping centers or older shopping centers giving way to new mixed-use residential commercial development. This is where these shopping centers or these places of commercial activity have outlived their commercial life and need to be changed. With the growth of the population surrounding them, this mixed-use development seems to be the development of choice. So we're seeing a lot more of retail on the ground floor, perhaps office on the next few floors, and residential and or even hotel and residential on the further higher floors. In terms of office development, there is a huge market for office development in the major cities of Canada. Again, we are seeing cap rates of around the 6% in the office marketplace. There is also a very large consolidation of the office market by the larger players, but there is a large opportunity for investors and developers for commercial office development in the major cities and the secondary cities, like we talked about, London, Ottawa, Kitchener, and so on in the Ontario marketplace. Industrial growth has also been large. We've recently seen a surge of demand for industrial space. And industrial space, which was running at a higher cap rate for the last year or two, seems to be, at least in the province of Ontario, beginning to get lower cap rates. The demand has surged in the 20 to 60,000 square foot space for users as well as investors. So overall, in the office market, retail market, or the industrial market, that 4 to 6% is where we're seeing our cap rates currently. In the Ontario marketplace, we might see it a little higher in the Alberta marketplace. Quebec seems to be seeing a drop in the cap rates as well. We haven't talked much about our eastern provinces, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and so on. A lot of higher opportunities there as well. Cap rates are certainly going to be much higher in those areas, but we're seeing a lot of investment go into those areas from the European countries. Britain, Germany have been two of the countries that have spent a lot more money in those areas right now. For our USA partners, that area would be a significant area of growth to watch out for in the commercial and residential areas. In the multi-unit rental market, if we talk of apartment buildings for rent, we're seeing a very, very low cap rate. Recently, transactions have been done as low as 3.5% cap rates. The demand is very strong in that marketplace. The availability of inventory is extremely low. And there is an opportunity there for growth of development in that area, especially in the major cities, again, as we talk about Toronto and its suburbs, Mississauga, Oakville, Oshawa, and so on. Industry as such has changed. We're seeing a lot more brain-powered industry coming into Canada as opposed to hand-powered. We're seeing a lot of research and development coming in. Our universities are playing a major role in this area, and every province has some major world-class university. So industry around universities is also growing tremendously. And we're seeing in university towns becoming industrial hubs as well. Places such as Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, Guelph in the Ontario marketplace have seen major growth with large telecom, communication, power, renewable energy type of R&D activity going on, with new industries coming on board on a very frequent basis in those areas. The fishing industry on the east, the lumber industry in the east, the mining in northern Ontario and some of the other northern areas, Oil with a little bit of comeback is playing a major role as well. And we're also seeing a lot of new development in the pre-built housing market in Canada in the last 2 or 3 years. This area seems to be growing at a very large pace, not only for local use, but even for export to other countries. Canada has played a major role in the pre-built housing market for a number of years, but this is growing even further now. I'm sure you will have a lot more questions, so please send in your questions to Anne so that we can answer them as we go along. This obviously is an overview of the marketplace, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to answer more of your questions as we go along. Next slide, please. Toronto is, again, the hub of Canada. It is the financial hub, it is the commercial hub, it is the population hub, it is the immigrant hub. So what we're seeing is everybody wants to come into the Toronto area and its suburbs, and then they may branch off into areas of interest later on. But the Toronto marketplace is the pull. Everybody starts off in Toronto. Toronto is not based on any one particular industry except for finance. Finance for all of Canadian activity comes through Canada, through Toronto. All inflow and outflow of currency in Canada is through the Toronto marketplace. What you're seeing on the screen of the skyline of Toronto is changing tremendously. The commercial hub of Toronto is world-class. All major companies around the world are represented in one form or another in the Toronto marketplace. This obviously leads to a very large influx of labor, which might not also be immigrant. They might just be people coming in on work permits to work in these industries. We have a huge demand for IT and research and development workforce in the Toronto marketplace. And again, when I'm talking of Toronto, I'm talking of Toronto and its suburbs within a 2.5 hour radius of Toronto. We have an area north of the downtown Toronto core called Richmond Hill and Markham. Markham has become the major location for the IT firms such as AMD and all your other techno companies are all represented there. Having said that, Google is now developing a very major part of our Toronto downtown waterfront into a research and development city. This has created a huge demand for development along the eastern core of the downtown, which until recently had been very derelict. So we're beginning to see a new downtown development happening east of the major downtown core. There is a lot of vacant land in that area, and major US and Canadian companies are looking at developing those areas right now. This move by Google will create a totally new demand in Ontario for labor, for research and development, for IT, for renewable energy, One of the things that's going to be very, very big is the driverless cars development that will be part of that development in that new research and development center. An area that needs to be looked at very, very closely. We will see a demand for probably another at least 20 to 30,000 residential uses in the next 5 to 10 years in that immediate core. So the demand for downtown Toronto and the suburbs is increasing leaps and bounds. We're also beginning to see a lot of inquiry from companies such as Disney and other entertainment companies from around the world, looking at seeing how they can develop within the 2-hour range of Toronto. They're looking for lands as we speak to do development in those areas. Obviously, development by these companies will create a new residential and commercial demand in our marketplace. So I would very strongly suggest that Ontario be given a very strong look at from your markets. And also understand that when you come in and invest in these areas, the Canadians are also going to come out and invest in your areas because they're going to be meeting and greeting with people from your areas that will be coming and working and opening businesses here as well. So there's going to be a two-way opening of activity, real estate and development activity for you when you come into these areas. Toronto Global is a website that will give you a very, very good idea of the kind of talent we have, the skilled talent we have in Canada, what kind of a competitive edge we have, what kind of industries we have here, and how you can start your business. Again, highly recommend to you that you build your relationships with trusted agents here in Toronto, which you will find on these websites. We have a very large, very talented group of trusted realtors in this area who can help you and become your partners. I would also suggest to you that you find a team of people here, realtors who have their own backup teams of lawyers, researchers, marketing, and so on, who can help you to be your eyes and ears on the ground when you are working in this area. That is the same that we look for when we come into your area to work. And when we come into your area, you come into our area, we are building relationships and partnerships, which go a long way in further development and growth. Next slide, please. The transaction process here in commercial real estate is slightly different from what is done in most parts of the US. You will probably find that the buyer will look at realtor.ca or look at a realtor to help find a property of their type, of the required type here in Canada. FinTrack, the financial tracking system for Canada, which is looking, of course, towards the money laundering and fraudulent activity in Canada, plays a major role in every transaction. It is preferred to have the money in Canada at a Canadian bank through your US bank at least 3 to 6 months before a transaction is made, so that that money is not only available at the time of a transaction, but that it is also been through the process by the bank and when is being used, there are no further delays in releasing that money. So financing is very, very important. Financing is available for non-residents and foreign investors. The rules for financing might be slightly different from that of a local Canadian buyer. A very interesting thing for you to note is that in two regions of Canada, Vancouver, Metro Vancouver and Metro Toronto, and when I say Metro Toronto, I'm talking of what we call the Greater Toronto Area, the GTA, which stretches what we call the horseshoe, which goes the Niagara Falls to Oshawa area. If you look at a Canadian map, you will be buying if you bought a residential property, you will be subject to a 15% non-resident tax. So you will be paying 15% of the value of the property to buy that property if you are a non-resident. This does not apply to commercial activity. This is only for residential activity. Now, in Ontario, when you have this non-resident speculation tax and the information logins are available on your screen right now. When you go to these sites, you will find out that in Ontario, if you became if a non-resident became a resident within 2 years, or got a work permit within 2 years, this tax would be refunded. Whereas in British Columbia, it is a non-refundable tax. So you have to consider those things when you're looking at investing in residential in these two areas. Can we go back to the last slide for a second, please? Zoning, again, plays a major role like it does in your areas. We're very strict on certain zoning requirements. So when you are developing and want to develop commercial property or mixed use, you'd have to be very careful about the zoning requirements. Once all your research has been done, obviously there's got to be room for due diligence after you have purchased, but you will obviously be doing a lot of due diligence prior to purchase. An offer to purchase or an agreement of purchase and sale would be completed. Now, one major difference between the United States and Canada is that the real estate brokerages in most cases hold the deposit funds in trust, as opposed to the escrow going to an escrow agent. So the real estate brokerages are required to hold a trust account, and the trust funds are not released until the transaction is completed, or if there is a court case involved, under court order, or if there is a mutual release by both parties to release that money. So the money is very, very safe in the brokerage's trust accounts. They are also insured to certain levels. Now, when you make your agreement of purchase and sale and a deposit is given, typically it will be a conditional agreement of purchase and sale. It'll be in this time that you are arranging your financing, you are doing your due diligence on the property, you are putting your company together that is going to eventually own that property, and all this period will be dependent on the type of property you are buying. It could be anything from 1 month to 1 year, even depending on how much work needs to be done on that activity. Once that activity is completed, you will go into what is called a title search. And that is when the property title, any work orders, any orders put in by the municipalities on that property are searched. And if there are any, the seller has the opportunity to clean that situation out so that there is a clean transfer of title to the new owner. Once this is all cleared up, closing takes place where the two firms of attorneys do the paperwork, exchange the paperwork and the money, and title is made out and given to the new owners. When we talk about financing, there are different terms and different types of financing available for different types of property. I will give you an example that if you are buying a residential property today for your personal use, a Canadian might be able to buy it with 20% down. A non-resident might require 35% down payment. Our mortgages are also different from yours in the US. We do not have 30-year non-recourse mortgages. We have amortization periods which might run from 20 to 30 years, but mortgages would generally be due every 3 or 5 years, at which time you will renew your same mortgage or go to another lender if you so chose for a better deal. The interest rates at that time might be lower or might be higher. So again, it is a renewable mortgage for a period of time, for an amortized period of generally commercial, where you would find anywhere from 15 to 25 years. Residential, you'd find generally from 20 to 30 years. Again, these are general overview ideas. When you build your relationship with your local partner realtor, you would be able to get more information and specific information on the type of properties that you are buying. Next slide, please. CREA Global is a body that we have under the Canadian Real Estate Association. CREA Global prepares information on activity in Canada, real estate activity, inbound and outbound activity. They would be able to help you in getting more knowledge about owning property in Canada, how to buy, how to sell, and so on. More information on the transaction process and how to work with the Canadian realtor. Sharon will be giving us a little bit of an overview in a few minutes about the real estate activity that CREA Global gets involved. Again, you can find CREA Global through the realtor.ca website or by going to creaglobal.com. It is also available in several languages, so this could help for your foreign clients as well. Next slide, please. Representation in Canada is very similar to yourselves in the US. You could have a buyer representation and of course a listing from the seller. The timelines, as I alluded to you a little earlier on, depending on how much research you want to do before you go in, but once you start the process of an agreement of sale, it could be anything from 1 month to a year for commercial properties, depending on how much you have to do in terms of due diligence. But I'm going to say, as an average, you're talking of about 60 to 90 days for closing of a transaction. We use lawyers or attorneys to do our transactions here, not notaries. Notaries might be used to do some kind of documentation, but the full transactions are done by the attorneys, who we call lawyers. As I alluded to you, earlier on also, we do not use escrow agents here, but our lawyers or our attorneys are the ones that could hold the money, or the real estate brokerages who are well qualified to do that with a real estate trust account. The money at closing then goes into the lawyer's account for them to distribute. The transaction costs will depend on the type of properties that you are buying, and from province to province they do differ, but I can give you an idea of your costs in Ontario. For example, we have what is called a land transfer tax. Every buyer will pay a land transfer tax. It is a scaled tax based on the price. However, till about a price of about $600,000 or $700,000 as an average, this is not carved in stone, but as an average, is about 1% of your purchase price. However, keep in mind, you are buying a property in the city of Toronto, there is a second land transfer tax, which is called a municipal land transfer tax, and which is almost equivalent to the land transfer tax. So there would be an additional 1% transfer tax that you would pay in the city of Toronto. Then there is the lawyers or the attorney's fees, which on a residential property could be anywhere from about $700 to $1,500. There would be some documentation transfer fees and so on for another $1,500 or so. And if you are going to get mortgage insurance, that would be dependent on the size of the mortgage. This could be anything from about 0.1% to 1%. As you go higher in the price, when you start going over $1 million, the numbers start increasing quite high. So those are generally your legal and transaction costs in a transaction. Again, you need to talk to your attorneys and your realtor partner in each individual province that you are dealing with. I alluded to FinTrack. Financial services are all taxable as well. By the way, any fees that you are paying, I'm going to, in the transaction cost, there is what we call HST, Harmonized Sales Tax, which in the province of Ontario is 13%. In terms of new build properties, this might be refundable to you. If you are doing a commercial transaction and you have a HST registration in Ontario, and the seller also has a registration in Ontario, you might not be required to pay the HST. Again, it is transaction to transaction based. You need to talk to your attorney about that information and accountant. You need an attorney, you need an accountant, you need a trusted realtor, you need other advisors. It is very important that you have a trusted realtor who has his own team of people here who can help you with all this information. FinTrack is a very major part of all our transactions. We do not, if there are any transactions over $10,000 in cash, we have to report them. We also have a form which we have to complete as realtors, and if we feel that it is a suspicious transaction, we have a reporting process to report that suspicious transaction. Again, your realtor partner will be able to help you in this direction. Next slide, please. We talked about the taxes. Please make sure you check on these before you come in, because there will be a requirement for cash upfront at the time of closing if you are in any of these two areas. Next slide. Okay. Any questions and answers?
So we currently do not have any. Oh, here we go. Okay, I have the first question. Very safe with brokers. In us, it is usually the brokers who are broke, used up the trust fund case after case.
Okay, so you're saying, is it safe to be with the brokers? Is that the question?
Yes, the question is very safe with the brokers. In us, it is usually the brokers who are broke, used up the trust fund case after case.
Yeah. Well, in Canada, specifically in Ontario, I can speak to also. Our laws are very, very tight. We are audited. Brokers are audited by the registrar on a regular basis. The funds are also insured to certain levels for the brokerage. Every brokerage, every broker, every salesperson in Ontario has to be insured. It's a compulsory insurance. And this insurance covers three things. One is the deposit, one is the agent's commission, and the third is the buyer's deposit. There are limits to all of these insurances, but it is by law required. Yes, there are brokerages that have been caught with their hand in the pot, but they have lost their licenses and have been criminally dealt with. I'm probably going to say that in the last year, there were probably, out of 2,500 brokerages in Ontario, there were probably 2 that were closed down for that kind of activity. So it is very, very safe. You also have the option of leaving it with the attorney's trust account, if you so desired. Attorneys and realtors are the only 2 groups of people that have trust accounts allowed in Ontario. Okay, hope that answers your question.
Okay, and then we have another one. Is a money order or cashier's check considered as cash?
Yes, it is. That is, well, it's cash in the terms of we look at it as cash, but it is actually a bank instrument. We do not, if a client brought in a $10,000 money order, that would not be something we would have to report. That is just a typical way of paying. All transactions are paid for by money order, electronic transfer, or bank draft.
Okay. We don't have any other questions as of right now. Let's see.
Perfect. Okay, can everybody hear me? Now you can see me. Hello.
Now we can see you too.
Perfect. Well, good. It's almost afternoon here, so good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I'm Sharon Von Schaumburg. I am product manager of global services for the Canadian Real Estate Association. So I wanted to thank Aziz for his great overview. I know there's a lot of detail involved in a transaction, whether it be residential, commercial. So that was a great overview. Aziz has been quite active with us at the Canadian Real Estate Association. I've had the pleasure of working with him on our global committee. And for those of you who might have noticed in his long list of designations, he's a CIPS designee as well as an instructor. So I've offered many CIPS here in Canada, and Aziz has instructed quite a few of those. So you're in great hands on all that information and a great contact for you moving forward. So I'm just going to give a very quick overview. I know we're close to ending time, and I don't want to be the person standing between anyone and their lunch. So there I am, a nicer photo of myself. Again, I hold monthly webinars as well for our global affiliates. So I just wanted to share a quick video on our global affiliates program and then make 3 quick comments, and then we'll be able to sign off on the webinar. So I'll proceed to show the video on our program, which was launched about 2 years ago now.
In real estate, connections mean opportunities. Making global connections can increase valuable referral opportunities and grow your business internationally. With the Canadian Real Estate Association's global affiliates, get access to a network of globally minded Canadian realtors and open the door to CREA's active global realtor directory. Increased exposure for referrals, plus many more benefits. Because in the end, being a successful real estate professional isn't about where you are on the map. It's about the connections you have across it. Become a CREA Global Affiliate. www.creaglobal.ca.
So there we go. I hope everyone was able to hear that. That's just a little illustration on our program. So we launched our program, as I said, it's almost 2 years now. And really, the reason we launched the program is the Canadian Real Estate Association would attend the National Association of Realtors conference every year. And the #1 question was, how can we more easily connect with Canadians? So our Global Affiliates program was launched in the hopes of doing just that, helping both Canadian realtors as well as international realtors make those connections across brands. Our 2 main prongs or focuses for this program is trying to make connections easier and efficient for realtors on both sides of the border, and educating both our Canadian realtors and our international realtors about cross-border transactions. So on our international side, trying to educate realtors about what is different about a Canadian client or working with a Canadian client going in, what should you be aware of? Because a term, what you may use in the US, that term may mean something different in Canada and vice versa. So what you see on the screen in front of you is if you sign up and subscribe to become a global affiliate, you get access to a few different networking opportunities, some virtual and some live. This here is the global directory. When you sign up, you get a profile of yourself, who you are, your brand, your specialties, your languages, and you can search our global directory, which then has all of our global affiliates and all our Canadians who've opted in, and you're able to review. Let's say you're looking for someone in the Toronto area because you know they're buying in Texas and you want someone with a CIPS, or you want someone who speaks Spanish. You're able to put an advanced search feature and search on all of those qualities. You're able to export lists of these contacts and start communicating first originally through the directory and then eventually on your own. Here's a sample of some of your own Texas Realtors who have signed up with as global affiliates. So this gives you an overview of what you're able to put in. And here's a detailed listing of how it looks. You're able to send an email right from the directory, as well as download, as I said, contacts from the directory. The other few things we do are things like this, a webinar. We host very similar ones, typically the 3rd Wednesday of every month on different topics. And we have some other marketing material that our internationals can use to let their local clients know they're connected Canadian. We don't want you to lose out on opportunity of any Texan that may be investing in Canada. You can make that referral and make that referral commission. So these are just some of the marketing assets that we have available. I send out a global view email monthly, spotlighting both a Canadian and an international, as well as any global networking tips and upcoming events. So this is just a quick overview of what you would see in that email should you be a subscriber. And then the biggest one is, of course, we all know nothing beats meeting in person. Even though you have a nice video image of myself here, it's really great to meet in person. So we do host networking events. We also organize and help U.S. associations organize trade missions into Canada. So our global receptions are typically held at the larger events. So we do hold a Canadian networking reception at NAR every year. This year it is in San Francisco, November 8th to 11th. The Canadian reception is typically on Friday evening. All of the Canadian delegates are invited, but only global affiliates are invited to attend. So to get access to this reception, you are a global affiliate. We just held one at the Toronto, a larger Canadian conference called Realtor Quest, and we had roughly 150 people out to that. There was a Texas booth. Florida was there, Arizona was there, Panama, Costa Rica, and again, all our global affiliates were invited, and Canadian locals were invited to mix and mingle. So that's just some of the photos you're seeing there in the group. Here's some more from the same event and from our trade shows that we do. I'll actually be coming out to Texas in September for the Texas State Conference. That's the first time. And what we'll do is we'll be inviting our Canadian opt-ins, anyone who's opted into our program, if they happen to be in Texas or want to come down and join me at the booth, they're welcome to do that. So we're hoping to have some Canadian realtors attend with myself as well. So this, again, is just a summary. It shows the page where you can learn more about Korea Global. And if you have any interest in subscribing, please do check out our website. There's also an email address, global@korea.ca. Should you have any questions, we'll be more than willing to answer them. And as I said, our hope is to make connections easier and less time consuming for both Canadians and our international realtors for that inbound, outbound business. So Annie, thank you so much for this opportunity to present to your group. And I'll just turn the mic over to you for any closing remarks.
Annie, may I just say one more thing quickly?
Yes.
When you do meet your realtor partner, make sure you send a referral agreement and make sure you claim your commissions.
Yes.
That is very, very important. 60% of the referrals don't get claimed internationally. So please do that. And if I can be of any assistance, please give me a call. Contact me. You can contact me on Korea Global as well. And I look forward to being of assistance to you, all of you, at any time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you both so much. Ton of information. Very great. Also, just anyone who's watching, this will be recorded, or it is being recorded. It will be posted on our YouTube channel and Facebook channel. So thank you both again. And everyone have a great day.
Perfect.
Thank you, Annie. Thanks, Sharon.